and wrap it up. The Conference of the Americas on International Education and Chile, our host country, extend an invitation to the community of international education professionals and government representatives to participate in its 7th edition CAEI Virtual 2021. Keynote speakers, expert sessions, and plenary panels, an opportunity to interact with practitioners and top-level decision makers from higher education institutions, brought together to chart the future of international education in the Americas. Make new contacts, share experiences, and strengthen academic cooperation in networking sessions and roundtables with peers from over 50 countries across the globe. And all this in a new virtual environment especially created for CAEI. So let's chart the future together. We look forward at seeing you at CAEI Chile 2021. Good morning, everyone from Montreal. Bonjour tout le monde. Bon dia y buenas tardes. It's actually good night in Japan, good afternoon in Paris and Durban, and very early good morning in near Tijuana, Mexico. We're very excited to welcome everyone to this second pre-conference webinar in our series of webinar leading to CAEI, the Conference of the Americas on International Education, next October in Chile. And today is a very special day because we're receiving guests from all corners of the world. I just want to remind everyone that simultaneous interpretation is available. So if you look, those who are registered on our Zoom platform, you will find the interpretation and you can select your Spanish or English channel. Yo decía que recuerdo a todos los participantes registrados en el Zoom que la interpretación simultánea está disponible. Los panelistas van a presentar en ambos idiomas, así que les pido elegir el canal de inglés o el canal de español según su preferencia. I would like to take a few moments to introduce you to a good friend and colleague of mine, Giorgio Marinoni, from the International Association of University. IOHE is a member of the IAU and a collaborator. We work in a continental perspective from Northern Canada all the way to Patagonia, Chile. And our friends at the IAU have the privilege to work with all continents. So we're one of the little sister organizations that is part of this very large family. And Giorgio together set up a great panel. Many of you are aware that the IAU completed a worldwide survey on future of higher education in the post-pandemic era, challenging and questioning all of the higher education institutions around the world about what their expectations following the pandemic. And Giorgio is now offering to share some of these outcomes, focusing on internationalization of higher ed with colleagues from Mexico, Japan, and South Africa. So we're very excited and thrilled to welcome this group. Giorgio, muchísimas gracias por haber aceptado nuestra invitación. estoy seguro que nuestros participantes en las Américas tienen mucho interés en conocer lo que van a contarnos desde 3 continentes y les deseo todo lo mejor por este segundo webinario. The floor is yours, Giorgio.
Muchas gracias, David, merci y un buenos días, una buena tarde o también una buena noche por algunos de los participantes que están aquí de todas partes del mundo, y esto es seguramente algo muy especial de este webinario organizado en la pre de la conferencia CAEI. Yo también tengo la suerte de tener 3 excelentes panelistas conmigo hoy. El primer panelista es el profesor Fernando León García, el presidente de la Universidad CETIS en México y también presidente de la Asociación Internacional de los Presidentes de las Universidades por los años 2021-2024. También tenemos el profesor Tetsuo Morishita, que es el vicepresidente para los asuntos académicos mundiales y también profesor de Derecho a la Universidad Sofía en Tokio, en Japón. Y último, pero claramente no es menos importante, el doctor Laverne Samuels, que es el director internacional de Educación Internacional y Partnership a la Universidad Tecnológica de Durban en Sudáfrica. Antes de dejar las palabras a los 3 panelistas para presentar sus perspectivas, voy a presentar brevemente, como David ha dicho ya, los resultados de la segunda encuesta mundial de la Asociación Internacional de las Universidades sobre el impacto de la COVID-19 en la educación superior en el mundo. Espero que podáis ver la presentación que he preparado, muy poca transparencia. Como he dicho, esta segunda encuesta mundial ha sido la segunda edición, claro, como el nombre dice, después de una primera edición que ha sido hecha en 2020 y podéis encontrar el informe en el sitio web de la EU. Después la transparencia estará disponible, podéis encontrar el informe en el sitio web. Esta segunda encuesta mundial ha sido conducida por la Asociación Internacional de las Universidades entre el 15 de febrero y el 1 de junio del 2021 y era una encuesta en 3 lenguas, en inglés, en español y en francés. Y su objetivo era de capturar de hacer una consultación institucional para ver cuál es el impacto de la COVID-19 sobre diferentes aspectos de la educación superior, especialmente la gobernanza y la financiación, la enseñanza y el aprendizaje, la investigación y el compromiso con la sociedad. Como he dicho, muy importante, una perspectiva institucional, y entonces hemos preguntado a las instituciones de responder solamente con una respuesta para institución. Y por eso hemos 496 respuestas de instituciones de educación superior en 112 países y territorios en el mundo. Y como podéis ver a la derecha, el número de respuestas ha hecho posible hacer también un análisis regional en 4 regiones del mundo: América, África, Asia y Pacífico y Europa. Y algo muy importante, América es toda América, América del Norte y América del Sur. Y como se puede ver en estos 2 gráficos también, esta región es la región menos representada, y eso desafortunadamente porque las instituciones de educación superior, sobre todo en América del Norte, no han respondido a la encuesta segundo su peso en la educación superior en el mundo. Pero las instituciones de América Latina sí, pero desafortunadamente, como en América del Norte no, hemos tenido que crear una sola región para toda América. El otro resultado importante en el perfil de las instituciones que han respondido a la encuesta, el 60% son instituciones públicas y son instituciones medio pequeñas. Casi la mitad tienen menos que 5.000 estudiantes. Esto brevemente para introducir el perfil de la encuesta. La encuesta es una encuesta bastante grande, bastante comprensiva de respuestas, pero hoy no tenemos el tiempo para investigar todos los aspectos de la encuesta y voy a presentar solamente un aspecto específico, que es el aspecto de la estrategia de internacionalización. Algo muy importante a decir aquí es que la mayoría, casi todas las instituciones que han respondido a la encuesta, tienen una estrategia de internacionalización. Ya eso es algo importante y no es algo común en el mundo. Entonces tenemos un perfil muy particular. Y la primera pregunta que habíamos hecho a estas instituciones era si la pandemia COVID-19 ya ha tenido un efecto sobre la estrategia de internacionalización. Y podemos ver que en la mayoría de las instituciones sí que ha tenido un efecto, pero solo en el 28% de las instituciones ya se ha cambiado la estrategia de internacionalización. En un otro 39% hay una discusión abierta sobre cómo cambiar la estrategia de internacionalización debido a la pandemia. Hemos también mirado en la diferencia entre las instituciones públicas y privadas y diferencia por regiones, y podemos ver que las instituciones privadas parecen más reactivas, ya han cambiado, más instituciones privadas han cambiado su estrategia de internacionalización que instituciones públicas. Pero eso también podía significar que la pandemia ha tenido un impacto mayor en las instituciones privadas que en las públicas. Y también para región, aquí es muy interesante, América ha sido la región donde hay más instituciones de educación superior que ya han cambiado su estrategia de internacionalización, 42% de ellas. La segunda pregunta claramente era cómo va a cambiar o cómo ha cambiado la estrategia de internacionalización. Había diferentes actividades de internacionalización. El gráfico aquí es un poco pequeño, pero tenemos la movilidad de estudiantes, la movilidad de profesores, los escambios virtuales y el aprendizaje colaborativo en línea, la internacionalización en casa, la internacionalización de programas de estudio y también el training para los profesores sobre las competencias interculturales e internacionales. Y como podemos ver en este gráfico, los intercambios virtuales y el aprendizaje colaborativo en línea y en una segunda posición la internacionalización en casa y la internacionalización del programa de estudios van a tener mucha más importancia en la nueva estrategia de internacionalización. Entonces, dos actividades que van a ganar importancia en el futuro. En cambio, por todas las otras actividades vemos una una desigualdad muy grande entre las universidades. Tenemos tres tipos de universidad. Las universidades donde la importancia de una actividad ha aumentado, ha disminuido o se ha quedado igual. Y si vamos a mirar un poco más en detalle alguna de esta actividad, podemos ver, por ejemplo, por la atracción de los estudiantes internacionales, que esta actividad presenta, como he dicho, mucha desigualdad también en las regiones, pero se ha quedado una actividad importante. Si lo vemos, por ejemplo, en Asia y Pacífico, hay mucha más instituciones de educación superior donde la importancia de la atracción de estudiantes internacionales aumenta que disminuye. Entonces eso es algo que podría ser una sorpresa porque se puede pensar que la pandemia ha hecho disminuir la importancia de la atracción de estudiantes internacionales, pero los datos de nuestra encuesta no dicen eso, dicen exactamente el contrario. Por cuanto hemos visto la internacionalización de los programas de estudio y la internacionalización en casa, en todas las regiones su importancia ha aumentado, pero aquí, como estamos en Chile, estamos en el webinario CAEI, me parecía muy interesante presentar este resultado porque en América, sobre todo, esta importancia ha aumentado al 71% de las instituciones que han respondido a la encuesta. Por fin, aquí es siempre interesante a nivel mundial, pero también a nivel de América, la importancia de la movilidad académica. Aquí también hay mucha desigualdad entre las instituciones, pero aquí en América el resultado es al revés. La importancia en América casi a la mitad de las instituciones ha disminuido. Entonces, algunas conclusiones para esta breve presentación, introducción al diálogo que vamos a tener con los panelistas. Podemos ver que la pandemia de la COVID-19 ha tenido un efecto sobre la estrategia de internacionalizaciones a la mayoría de la institución de educación superior. Pero todavía eso no ha creado un cambio de la institución en la mayoría. Todavía. Podría ser que en el futuro eso se va a producir. Vemos claramente una importancia mayor de los cambios virtuales y del aprendizaje colaborativo en línea, sobre todo, pero también de la internacionalización de los programas de estudio y de la internacionalización en casa. Y eso especialmente en una región específica que es la América. A nivel de movilidad de estudiantes a movilidad de profesores, vemos un elevado nivel de desigualdad con 3 grupos claramente identificables, como he dicho antes, lo que han aumentado, lo que han disminuido, lo que han tenido la importancia igual. La atracción de los estudiantes internacionales todavía se queda importante en casi todas las regiones del mundo. En cambio, los intercambios de estudiantes, esta importancia parece haber disminuido en muchas regiones del mundo, pero aquí también tenemos que acordarnos que hay mucha desigualdad. Mismo por lo training del personal académico. Algo que hemos visto también por resultados de otras partes de la encuesta, no solo de esta parte de la internacionalización, es que este resultado de una desigualdad que ha aumentado entre las regiones del mundo y también entre las instituciones de educación superior en la misma región del mundo, es algo que se reproduce por muchos resultados, no solo para la internacionalización, pero lo hemos visto también por otros aspectos de la encuesta. Y también un otro resultado muy claro que vemos aquí con la importancia de los cambios virtuales y del aprendizaje colaborativo en línea, es que la transformación de la enseñanza y del aprendizaje con un modelo donde el aprendizaje a distancia y el aprendizaje mixto es mucho más importante, es claramente algo, como diría, la transformación principal que estamos viviendo en este momento del mundo. Quería acabar aquí diciendo que esta transformación verso una enseñanza, un aprendizaje en línea, seguramente tiene soluciones a algunos desafíos, pero también puede introducir nuevos desafíos que las instituciones de educación superior tienen que afrontar en el futuro. Y con eso quería abrir el discurso con los panelistas y quería empezar con el profesor Fernando León García para introducir su propia perspectiva también de una encuesta que la Asociación Internacional de los Presidentes de la Universidad ha hecho el año pasado. Profesor García, la palabra a usted.
¿Se escucha? ¿Sí? Ok, muy bien. Muy bien, pues muchas gracias. Thank you to colleagues Julian, Marinone, Morishita, Samuels, and Kawashi. Konnichiwa, bon dia, dobry beisor, good morning, buenos días, ¿cómo están todos? I will make my remarks in Spanish for the advantage of the majority of those connected, but my remarks are written in English. La presentación la haré en español, aunque los comentarios como están en el PowerPoint están en inglés. Un placer estar aquí. Y antes que nada hay que acordarnos que la internacionalización como tal no es solamente movilidad, ¿verdad? No voy a leer todos los motivos por los cuales y significados bajo los cuales existe la internacionalización, pero son múltiples. Y lo que vamos a encontrar es que dependiendo de la región en el mundo en el que esté ubicado uno, va a ser la prioridad que eso va a marcarse. En países desarrollados es más reclutamiento de estudiantes, ingreso, hay algo de internacionalización, mientras que en los países en vías de desarrollo es más desarrollo de capacidad como tal. En efecto, como decía nuestro colega Marinone, también nosotros efectuamos una encuesta fue para rectorías, no fue para Senior International Officers, así es de que la perspectiva fue más desde la óptica del liderazgo, y la internacionalización fue una pequeña parte de aquello que preguntamos como tal. Aquí fue cuáles son los retos que habían estado teniendo en otoño del año pasado, las rectorías alrededor del mundo, y como parte de eso, uno de los aspectos era la internacionalización. Como comentaba nuestro colega Marinone, dependiendo de qué organización sea uno a la que pertenece, es la cobertura, la amplitud de la cobertura que logran. En el caso nuestro, la gran mayoría fue de las Américas e inclusive de Norteamérica, ¿verdad? Con una muy buena representación de Europa, pero en otras partes estuvo un poquito menor. Fueron más de 800 respuestas, 800 países, ¿verdad? Y aquí lo que les comparto son resultados muy similares a los que señala Marinone, con una leve diferencia en perspectiva. Número uno, las rectorías comentaban que a la luz de la pandemia, lo que se había acelerado y era de la más alta prioridad, recuerden, hay diferentes regiones, hay diferentes prioridades. El agregado nos dice que la importancia de las alianzas es fundamental, ha crecido, ¿sí? Si antes era importante, la pandemia nos ha llevado a todos a buscar cómo colaborar. Dos, ante la imposibilidad de tener alumnado que fuera de un país a otro, o lo que llamarían algunos student study abroad without mobility, dirían algunos. Es otra forma de referirse a eso. Lo que incrementó fue los ejemplos y las frecuencias con las que encontrábamos universidades implementando modelos virtuales o lo que se llamaría e-mobility como tal. Tercero, ya lo señalaba Marinone, en efecto, por eso la internacionalización en casa ha incrementado. Y como ven, número 5, porque en la gran mayoría eran de países en vías de desarrollo y no desarrollados, la cuestión de mantener o incrementar el número de estudiantes internacionales que se estaban reclutando fue número 5. Refleja pues la mayoría de las personas que contestaron como tal. Yo creo que más que repetir más aspectos y profundizar, lo importante desde una óptica de líderes es a donde nos lleva, ¿sí? Y una de las cosas que se preguntaba a los líderes era cómo veían los próximos 3 años o más el panorama en cuanto a la educación. Y número 1, la gran mayoría lo que veía era que ahora cualquier institución iba a tener una combinación en su ofrecimiento de programas. No iban a ser solo presenciales, solo en línea, solo híbridos. La mayoría de los que contestaron señalaron que observaban que las universidades iban a tener una combinación de modelos a través de los cuales la educación iba a ocurrir. Esto es importante porque entonces quiere decir que la manera en que concebimos y promovemos la internacionalización va a tener que cambiar. No desechar lo que ya era. Yo creo que se va a afianzar lo que era, pero vamos a tener que estar abiertos y alertas a nuevas formas de esto. Lo interesante aquí es el número 4. Dice modelos alternativos educativos. Curiosamente, si bien las otras respuestas es el agregado de todo el mundo, la número 1 en Iberoamérica fue modelos alternativos. Y esto lo que nos dice es de que a pesar de la pandemia, todavía hay dudas en Iberoamérica sobre el potencial y valor que puede tener la tecnología y modelos virtuales. Ojo con esto, porque creo que afianza lo que era una percepción de la vieja normal. Hay que estar atentos a lo que sucederá en la época post-pandemia. También muy importante desde la óptica de quienes representamos y cuál es el rol de las rectoras y rectores. Bueno, yo creo que aquí hay varios, voy a seleccionar varios. Uno es asegurarse que la internacionalización es parte del ADN o DNA de las universidades. Tiene que estar, como lo ha comprobado la encuesta de IAU en el pasado, hay un número creciente de instituciones que lo integran en el plan estratégico, fundamental. Las rectorías deben de señalarlo como una prioridad institucional. Si va en serio y es de largo plazo, deben de tener un comité de internacionalización. Deben de asegurarse que más allá de señalarlo en un plan, hay un equipo, un grupo de promotores y promotoras, no solo en el área internacional, sino los decanos, coordinadores de programas, directores de escuela, etcétera, que se conviertan en evangelizadores de la internacionalización. Es muy importante esto para que continúe avanzando este esfuerzo. También fundamental que veamos el papel del profesorado. Desde luego hay que ir y entender la internacionalización más allá que solo la movilidad, debe de ser exhaustiva e incluir currículum, incluir experiencias no solo de movilidad, sino como objetivos de aprendizaje que se puede lograr en casa, se puede lograr en el exterior. Aquí se señala lo de las alianzas y también muy importante que las rectorías lo vean como una inversión. Para cerrar, también les comparto, ¿verdad?, otros conceptos, algunos de los cuales directamente impactan cómo concebimos y cómo promovemos la internacionalización. Acabamos de tener nuestra reunión trienal. A nivel de liderazgo, se habla de que hay que estar atentos, que hemos pasado de emergencia a transición, a lo que debe de ser una transformación en la época post-pandemia. Hay que estar atentos a lo que llaman nimbility, la rapidez para poder adecuar y actuar. Liderazgo bifocal, corto plazo, largo plazo, local, global. Hay que asegurarnos que estemos ligados más y más a las habilidades. No niega la formación de personas, pero hay que entender esto. Se enfatiza lo intercultural e internacional. De una universidad nos vamos a ir a la multiversidad local, en donde es un balance de diferentes intereses a los cuales debe de responder la institución. Enfocarnos a buscar y a desarrollar talento. Hay muchos Einsteins, independientemente de las sociedades donde estemos, y la internacionalización es un conducto a través de lo cual podemos lograr esto. Concebir la diversidad y la inclusión como una fortaleza. Acordarnos de la empatía, solidaridad, flexibilidad y oportunidad. Y al final de cuentas, todo aquello que hagamos, acordarnos de la misión de nuestra universidad, la calidad con la que lo queremos ofrecer, la necesidad de una operatividad, de una sustentabilidad operativa y financiera y sobre todo ser estratégicos. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, profesor León García, por esta presentación muy interesante. Me alegra también ver que los resultados de las dos encuestas no son en contradicción uno con el otro, pero se refuerzan, y sobre todo para haber dado una perspectiva sobre el futuro y qué piensan los líderes de la institución de educación superior en el mundo. Y ahora vamos a pasar desde México a completamente otra parte del mundo, y voy a pasar por un momento a hablar en inglés también. And now I would like to move to Japan and introduce Professor Tetsuo Morishita, who is going to share the perspective, an Asian perspective and a Japanese perspective on the impact of COVID-19 on higher education. Professor Morishita, the floor is yours.
Professor, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your microphone is still closed.
Okay, sorry. Thank you very much. And again, buenos dias, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Tetsuo Morishita from Japan, and I would like to talk about the recent experience of Japanese universities in online international learning. Yes. As Giorgio mentioned, the result of the global survey by International Association of Universities shows the pandemic has stimulated an increase in the importance of virtual exchanges and collaborative online learnings. While virtual online international learning has brought us various new values, but at the same time, it causes various challenges too. We have two types of online exchange programs: full semester exchange and short-term exchanges programs. Short-term programs have three types. For example, in our universities, we sent in 2020, about 100 students participated in online exchange programs. And in 2021, already 124 students participate in short-term programs in summer session only. Also, CAEI is an important part of our online international learnings. Let's see the responses from students who participated in online exchange programs. I believe that these voices from students clearly shows the values and exchanges of online exchange programs. A student said the program was valuable because it had drastically improved his or her English skills. Also, the student said that he or she was able to use spare time, that's time other than the university's classes, for other purposes in Japan. Other students pointed out that online programs was easy to participate because of the low cost, apparently. However, that student also pointed out that the experience was different from what he or she had expected from a study abroad program because he or she could not have any local experience. As we can expect, there was a voice that having friends in online classes was difficult. Also, for Japanese students, which locates totally the opposite side of America, for Japanese students who wanted to participate in the programs in America, Europe, or Africa, the time difference caused some difficulty. Next, the voices of students who participated in short-term programs. A student says that he or she had lots of opportunities to talk with classmates and teachers through group works. Also, another student says that he or she still keeps in touch with students in the same program through SNS. Again, a student felt that time difference was a difficult part of online international programs. Next, let's see responses from foreign students who participated in the exchange programs offered by our university, Sophia Universities. We have participants from various countries. The responses shows that student satisfaction was not low. We are worried that student satisfaction would be lower than on-site studying abroad programs. However, this result shows that if we provide high quality and active virtual programs, we could get high student satisfaction as in the on-site study abroad programs. Next, this is a voice from foreign students who participate in the short-term programs. According to this survey, 26% students experienced the stress of communication due to the malfunction of internet. Also, again, the time difference was a very problematic issue, as shown in the slide. In one class, we had participants from almost all over the world, but as this slide shows, it is very tough to find a time zone that is comfortable equally for all students from all over the world. This slide is a summary of values and exchanges that we have found from the responses from students. The online exchange programs could give students high satisfaction as in the on-site programs, if we could offer good programs and active participation and active communications among participants. And in addition, the online programs could offer different values, such as low cost and more opportunities. Also, short-term online program could be a good preparation for future full semester exchange programs. On the other hand, as we have seen, there are various challenges. So, such as time difference, internet connections, loss of exposure to foreign culture and lives, difficulty to make friends, difficulty to make communication and group works. So we have to find a way to address these challenges more appropriately and effectively. Next, COIL, collaborative online international learnings. Japanese universities have become popular. COIL have become popular in Japanese universities for these years. The increase of online classes to react to the pandemic has improved the online skills of faculty members and the quality of IT facilities of universities. This made it easier to conduct COIL more effectively. However, to strengthen COIL programs more, we need to find a way to address the heavy burden of instructors. So various instructors point that such kind of burden as one of the reasons to feel hesitation to start a COIL program. And also IT facilities is insufficient. To respond to COVID-19, such as technologies or skills of instructors have been improved, but it is still insufficient to use the COIL as very effectively. Finally, I'd like to talk about on-site studying program. While we have promoted various online programs, still many students want to go abroad. Students prefer studying abroad in reality. My universities, in Sophia University case, we had stopped sending students abroad since last spring. But in May 2021, we decided to resume the studying abroad program from the autumn semester under strict conditions. There are some reasons as shown in the slide. However, our university did not simply return to the time before the pandemic. We set various conditions to exceptionally allow students abroad, studying abroad. Only students who satisfy these conditions can study abroad. I want to explain the importance of the condition I underlined. Students has made sufficient research of situation and risks in the area of study of the universities and consider measures to mitigate risks. We think with this condition, we could use the process of for preparation of the studying abroad could be used as an important learning opportunity of various risks and risk control and management, which would be very useful for the students' future. Regarding the Japanese government responses, in June 2021, Japanese government resumed the financial support to the students who are going to study abroad for more than 9 months. This decision of the Japanese government accelerated the resume of studying abroad programs in various Japanese universities. However, Japanese government still has not resumed the issuance of student visa to foreign students, except for exceptional cases. So I have to say that on-site studying abroad programs is still very limited in Japan. I want to close my presentation by stressing that the importance of international education has not been decreased, or I should say has increased after the COVID-19. And in order to make more effective international education, I think we need to explore the better division of roles and collaboration of on-site and online international programs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Morishita, for a very interesting presentation about virtual exchange, collaborative online learning, and also the balance between these relative new methods of internationalization and the traditional mobility, and how to find a perfect balance between them. I would have many questions and it would be a very interesting discussion, but before going to the discussion, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Laverne Samuels to get a perspective from South Africa and Africa in general. Laverne, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Giorgio. If Professor Morishita unshares, I will share my slides. Colleagues, it's my pleasure to greet you from Durban, South Africa. I know we are straddling many time zones, so it's best for me to say good day. The approach that I will take in my presentation is to give you some perspectives on the challenges in Africa, then to give you how those challenges find expression in South Africa, and then give you the case study of Durban University of Technology and how we were able to overcome these challenges. And it culminated in us winning the AIEA Global Award for Innovation and Excellence in Internationalization in a year when internationalization was challenged so tremendously. The first point that I want to make is that even though I am highlighting the challenges that exist here, it's also about how Africa has overcome these challenges. One of the key areas within Africa that is challenging is the lack of proper infrastructure. Colleagues, I'm just going to unshare and reshare. I'm having a little bit of a technology, an issue with this. I will stop sharing and then I will share once again. Are you able to see my slides now?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay, one moment. I'll actually just escape from here and do that. My apologies for that. Okay, are you now able to see my slides?
Yeah, now it works.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yes, if I were to then go on to the next slide and talk about some of the issues in Africa, the lack of infrastructure is one of the biggest challenges. And that lack of infrastructure in this COVID environment is largely around the technology. It's around bandwidth. It's about access to Wi-Fi. It's about the cost of Wi-Fi. It's about the interconnectedness. And while other forms of physical infrastructure have been more of a challenge in the pre-COVID era, in the COVID era, it really is around technology. And many countries have put in significant efforts to upgrade this technology, and doing it at such short notice has not been easy. But even in South Africa, in the last 18 months, we have shown how our connectivity has improved, the cost of data has declined, and the access to data and Wi-Fi has increased. The lack of resources are actually multifold. It's often about the lack of human resources. It's also about the lack of resources within universities to function in the way that they would like. But having said that, I have to say that universities in Africa have also been resourceful in being able to overcome this by multi-skilling and upskilling their staff to be able to perform more than one function. And in internationalization particularly, you will find academics who have stepped up and taken on the role of championing internationalization in spite of it not necessarily being part of their core function. The lack of capacity, I think, has also plagued the continent. And here again, there are many programs afoot to build capacity. Some of these issues are not unique to Africa. A lack of capacity, I think, is a challenge in many parts of the world. But in Africa, it actually finds a particular face in the way that some countries are not able to remain competitive because of this lack of capacity. The lack of funding, I think, is one that we all experience throughout the world. And in Africa in particular, the spending on education and the internationalization of education particularly has been challenging. We've also had some historical impediments, and these historical impediments have largely been of a socio-political nature, and these have also held us back as a continent. And of course, the old debate of the North-South collaboration issue, where the partnership has not always been an equal partnership based on mutuality, and that has been a challenge as well. When I was president of the International Education Association of South Africa in 2014, I hosted a global dialogue. And in that global dialogue, we attempted to redress this imbalance that existed in international education, bringing new voices to the table, and also ensuring mutuality and a brand of internationalization that addressed all regions in the world. And of course, the big challenge that we have seen in this COVID era is the deepening and broadening of the fissures of inequality that have already existed. In South Africa, we see some of the challenges being mirrored, but in particular, some of the things that have held us back have been the parochialism of higher education in South Africa, where some universities that have already achieved, and South Africa has some highly ranked universities, have worked alone, and the level of collaboration has not been where it should be. Having said that, I think there is an example of where we can be competitive and collaborative at the same time. And I think the Australian model shows that very clearly, where universities are intensely competitive, but they also come together to produce a brand of international education that can be marketed around the world and puts the country in a very favorable position internationally. In South Africa, we have seen this parochialism being addressed, and the International Education Association of South Africa, University South Africa, which is the board of vice chancellors, have come together to work more closely and actually find the synergies that are so important to find in the sector. The lack of resources, and this lack of resources is really the inequities in resources, because there are some universities in South Africa that are very well resourced, but I often say that you are only as strong as your weakest link. And so we have to address this inequality in some universities, particularly around technology. And that goes to my next point, the ability of some universities to straddle this technology divide. I think that is being addressed currently. Also very important is that internationalization has been viewed in outdated ways at some universities, where the focus on physical mobilities have left them on the back foot and unprepared and very reactive in dealing with the current challenges. That, of course, has been addressed in a very significant way by the promulgation of a South African policy on internationalization. It's a policy framework, so every university can work within that framework. And I think that has in many ways strengthened the country. And again, in spite of these challenges, South Africa has remained really competitive in international education and still has the 8th largest number of international students in the world. The impact of national politics, like in many countries, also impacts on universities, and it is a challenge. And again, the inequalities of the past, the historical inequalities of the past in South Africa still play out in contemporary South Africa. And this is often from the basic education level at high schools and primary schools, and it plays a role in the type of students that we get in tertiary education. And this is an issue that will take us some time to address. These historical inequalities are not easily addressed because they have a socioeconomic basis that goes well beyond higher education. So let's look at Durban University of Technology. How were we able to actually beat these divides, overcome them, and become competitive as a university, not just in the rankings, but particularly within international education? And in many ways, it is actually encapsulated in these few words, from exclusive to inclusive. When I took on this role some years ago, I moved from a dean's office into this role. And for me, the academic enterprise was at the heart of internationalization. And so the academic enterprise should never be one that excludes students. Internationalization that I found at the time was exclusive, elitist, and in many ways elusive. We have moved to a brand of internationalization that is inclusive, inviting, and embracing. The definition that Hans de Wit actually came up on internationalization, and one that he built on from Jane Knight, talks about an intentional process. And for me, what was really important is the part that I highlight in red, the intentional process of integrating an international, intercultural, or global dimension into the purpose, functions, and delivery of post-secondary education in order to enhance the quality of education and research for all students and staff, and to make a meaningful contribution to students and to society. And for me, that is what it's all about. It's about achieving our global attributes and leaving nobody behind. So in our conference that we hosted last week, we actually revised that definition of internationalization to one that suits South Africa. And this was a definition that was presented by Dr. Samia Chasi and Dr. Savo Heliter. And Dr. Heliter works in my office at DUT. And it is really about encapsulating this inclusivity. It is about internationalization that must be intentional, critical, and comparative. And it talks about the inequalities and the injustices. It talks about a diverse global perspectives for our students, and one that addresses the progress of societies in South Africa and the world. It is still a definition that is being worked on, but it is one that excites us because it speaks to the type of internationalization that we are trying to embed in South Africa. This is strategy on a page. It's DUT's one-page strategy called Envision 2030. And I was privileged to be on a team of 8 that worked with our Vice Chancellor, Professor Mthembu, in establishing this strategy 2030. And this strategy on one page actually embeds internationalization in many, many ways. And it embeds the type of internationalization that we are trying to pursue. One that is inclusive, one that includes issues like COIL, internationalization of the curriculum. It is based on a DNA, which is values-based. And you will see that these are some of the values that we try to embed in internationalization. Issues like transparency, integrity, respect, accountability, fairness, and excellence. Internationalization is, this map, by the way, is read from the bottom up. It's based on stewardship being taken care of first, and it's based on lived values and creativity. And it moves upwards to embed issues like innovative curricula and research. And there again, internationalization of the curriculum plays a key role. You'll see another strategic objective, digital environment, where COIL and that type of internationalization is so important. We move on to the next level, which is sustainability. The next perspective is sustainability. And we have a strategic objective there called distinctive education. And for us, COIL and international virtual engagement is a form of distinctive education. By 2030, we want every student at DUT to have experienced COIL or international virtual engagement at least once. We move to the next perspective, and you'll see a strategic objective called engaged university. And this is about being deeply engaged in our various contexts. It's about the local, the regional, and the international, and how we bridge those different contexts. And it's about our students being local citizens, being deeply embedded in the local context, but equally being global citizens who see the link between the local and the global and how one impacts on the other. Innovation and entrepreneurship is central to the type of internationalization that we embrace, and you will see some of those innovations in the next slide. And then lastly, we look at the issue of adaptive graduates, and we believe firmly that internationalization and international preparedness is key in producing adaptive graduates. And you will see all of this leads to improving lives and livelihoods in society, and that society is both a local, regional, and global society. You will see our inclusive, comprehensive model of internationalization at DUT, and it's what we call the quad helix approach to internationalization. It's not just within the university, but we use the local environment. We work with government, with civil society, with business to actually embrace a form of internationalization that benefits our students so that they leave the university with the type of skills that are needed for the global workplace, but equally to have the type of human skills that contribute to the broader human project in the world. The type of internationalization that we have at DUT supports this inclusivity, mutuality, and diversity, but it's also about pursuing higher education and social justice through internationalization and decolonization. We embrace decolonization not as something that is counter to internationalization, but one that calls for broader and deeper and more diverse forms of internationalization. So decolonization should never be a narrow, parochial, and insular affair. And these are some of the projects that we've had around comprehensive internationalization. COIL has been very, very active at DUT, but equally we have a global learning series where we have international seminar series, we have international projects. So if you are not able to embrace a full COIL project, which is a pedagogy that is quite specific, there are other forms of global learning that we embed into the curriculum. We also have internationalization of advisory boards. Each academic program at DUT has an advisory board, and we have international colleagues that serve on this advisory board. So some of our efforts are very direct in influencing internationalization. Others are indirect by bringing the influence and the advocacy of international colleagues into academic departments. We also have an international virtual campus for open learning, where we've teamed up with 10 other universities across the world, from New Zealand in the East, all across to the West Indies in the West. And our students are able to take online courses from each other, where we teach. We have a teaching component, we have a staff development and research component, and we also have support for international offices, so that these students from these 10 campuses can enjoy the benefits of open learning from across the globe without having left their classrooms. And of course, we are looking increasingly at collaborative qualifications. In 2020, DUT won a bid to work as consultants to the Association of Commonwealth Universities, and we developed a toolkit for virtual engagement and international student exchange. And this toolkit is used by 600 universities of the Association of Commonwealth Universities. And to promote internationalization, we have developed 5 professional development modules that we present to the academic staff at DUT to teach them about internationalization and to drive the international agenda and ensure that it reaches the classroom. Thank you very much, colleagues. These are the 7 campuses of DUT, also showing the diversity of the university. Thank you very much, and over to you, Giorgio.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samuel Laverne. Thank you very much. A very interesting presentation, going from the regional down to the institutional. A very interesting case study of DUT and how to respond to the challenges brought by the pandemic with an inclusive strategy, and underlying that internationalization indeed has been disrupted by the pandemic, but actually this is also an opportunity, this disruption, to counter and the negative aspect that internationalization had before the pandemic with new means, but also new ideas of how to make internationalization more inclusive for everybody. And on this line, I would like to start the discussion with the three panelists with one very general question. All of you have touched upon your presentation the possibilities opened by the pandemic, and actually what I said a few moments ago, the fact that the dominant model of internationalization based on only the attraction of international students has been disrupted, and now with the introduction of new technologies, there are greater opportunities to widen the participants in internationalization, and also to really focus on the curriculum, on the programs. And I would like to ask you, in fact, to go deeper in this analysis. What do you see in the future, the balance between the challenges brought by the new technologies and the benefits brought by the new technologies, and the old benefits and challenges which were coming from the ancient model of internationalization based on mobility, how these two will be combined in the future? And another question, which is a little bit following up, is, do you think that this future, with the balance of these two models and these two tools of internationalization, will be able to reduce inequality in internationalization, or in the other hand, will increase it? And especially based on the experience inside your region. Whoever of you wants to take the lead and start, please. Okay, Professor Leon Garcia, floor is yours.
I think that it is not an either or. I think that what we will find is a coexistence. How much of one and how much of another you are able to implement will depend entirely on the stage of development that your institution happens to be in at this point in time. On the one hand, in terms of how well your institution has been able to implement and make sure that it's not simply using technology to promote programs, but technology to promote effective learning. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, it also relates to what capacity you have in terms of trying to internationalize your university. So I do not see it as an either or. I see it as a magical formula that is going to evolve depending on where you happen to be in the continuum. From my perspective, and I cannot speak for all, the trends that I read in different regions calls for a mixture of activities, where I think that the notion of this is pretty much like the current argument in terms of the pandemic. Should we vaccinate or should we not vaccinate? So, it's very controversial. We know we have to. So I think it's the same thing. Is internationalization, if we equate it to mobility, only valid if it's face-to-face? My sense is that the pandemic and certain trends we were observing before tells us that there's no reason why they cannot be combined. Okay, so that would be my initial reaction.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Laverne, please.
Yes, I want to agree with Professor Garcia. I don't think it's an either or. And I also want to say that I don't think we will ever get back to the position that we were in pre-COVID. I think the influence of the COVID era is here to stay, but it will also be interesting to see how much of the past practices are brought back in the post-COVID era. I think practices such as international mobility will come back. There's no doubt that they will come back, but I think their relative standing in the total picture may change quite significantly. I support international mobility. I think it's a very, very good form of internationalization, but one that should augment more inclusive forms of internationalization rather than being the cornerstone of internationalization, which it has been in some countries. Europe, which has the best funded mobility program, Erasmus, has found that only 20% of students actually have been mobile over this period. And Europe is a fairly small continent. I always make the joke that you can internationalize on a bicycle in Europe in a day. You can cycle through 3 countries, and yet we find 20% international mobility. In the wealthiest country in the world, in the US, this drops to 7%. In Africa, this drops to 1%. And I think in a continent like Africa, where we have 1% mobility, we cannot but find other ways of internationalizing, because every student and every academic needs that international dimension. They need that international preparedness. It's not just the student who can afford the mobility. It's not only that academic who's going to present at an international conference. Those international dimensions need to be embedded in the core activities of the university. And this is what I think COVID has done. We've actually put on our creative caps, and we found different ways of doing it. And some of them have been staring us in the face for a long time. We were lucky as a university. We started with international virtual engagements many, many years ago. But there are some universities that are now embracing it for the first time. And for me, I'm hoping that those universities will continue with those sorts of engagements and not give up on them when other forms of internationalization like mobility are possible again. So I'm hoping for a new normal that is more embracing, more inclusive, and more diverse in its practices.
Thank you very much, Laverne. Professor Morishita, would you like to add something to the discussion?
Yes, I agree with my colleagues, and I think that the key is a good balance and a good division of roles. Depending on the purpose of international education and learnings, for some purposes, online education is more effective or more cheap and more useful. But on the other hand, for example, in order to get the local exposures or the culture was to get various experiences, on-site studying abroad program is much better. So before pandemic, we have a very vague concept of studying abroad. But after the COVID-19, after the COVID period, we should consider what is the key purpose of international learnings. And depending on such purposes, we can combine the two majors for international education. Also, for example, we could combine two majors, virtual and on-site studying abroad programs. So we should find us the best combination and division roles.
Thank you very much, Professor Morishita, and thank you very much to all speakers. I will switch back to Spanish. Muchas gracias a todos los panelistas. Desafortunadamente no tenemos más tiempo por una conversación que ha sido muy interesante, porque ya hemos llegado a más que una hora del webinar. Y entonces dejo la palabra a David Julien para la conclusión del webinario. Muchas gracias a todos.
Gracias, Giorgio, y thank you all panelists. I think this was a very interesting discussion. Nuestro plan era de poner la mesa, ¿no? To set up the table for discussions at CAEI in October. Escuchando experiencias, me encantó escuchar sobre modelos de internacionalización decolonizados, las oportunidades también de la movilidad virtual. Nosotros en la UI, para dar un ejemplo reflejando lo que mencionó el Dr. Laverne Samuels, tuvimos un proyecto de intercambio virtual entre Mozambique and Brazil in Portuguese. So we can truly feel that borders are not the same anymore, and that virtual mobility allows for new patterns of collaboration. I would also like to remind all that we will receive at CAEI. CAEI is the Conference of the Americas, but we are receiving delegations from all over the world. So JAFSA being represented by Professor Morishita, there will be a Japanese delegation coming to CAEI looking at expanding their network and collaboration with Latin American universities. We have confirmation from Germany, Canada, the United States, New Zealand, Switzerland, China, Czech Republic, Belgium, and many other countries. So don't miss it. Registrations are open. We look forward for a very vast participation. These four panelists will be there to continue discussions during CAEI. So we look forward hosting everyone in October. Thanks again to everyone. Muchísimas gracias por su tiempo y compromiso. Un gran honor recibirlos en nuestra comunidad y espero verlos muy pronto.
Thank you very much.